The following is a recording of Session 8 of the BBS UK Saturday Conference Programme 2016. Puberty, Sexual Health and Relationships, Support and Information for Sensory Impaired Young People. The session was led by Gill Leno, PSHE Teacher, QAC College, Birmingham.
Listening to you give your talk about how you got into what you got into, it made me think about how I got into sex ed, because, you know, it's not a typical job. So what struck me actually was what Robin said was very similar for me. I had pretty much no sex education, which obviously left me obsessed. I also have a sister with learning disabilities, so it's a subject that once I got started on, it became rapidly apparent for me that what was really important was that the work that I do had to be focused around making it accessible and inclusive and rights-based to make a proper improvement for people who ordinarily wouldn't be getting much access to it, I believe. So let me tell you a little bit about, what goes on at Queen Alexandra College. So we are a specialist further education college in Birmingham, Harborne, just outside Birmingham, for young people 16 to 25 with complex needs. Now, we did used to be a school for the blind. We've been there for, well, you tell me, we were established in the 1860s as a school for the blind. And now I think probably about 3/4 of our students roughly have a visual impairment, as well as a whole multitude of other diagnoses. The majority of our students have got some form of learning disability or are on the autism spectrum, as well as having physical conditions which impact on their day-to-day life and learning needs. I have a very fancy title, which is that I am this PSHE specialist. That actually means that amongst the students I'm known as the sex lady, which is, it works. It's not quite so great when you're introduced to the parents forum that way, which happened this week. There was a long, horrified silence before I explained that I educate about it, not facilitate it, and then things went a little bit easier. Oh dear, yes, it was an awkward moment for everybody in the room, but we got past it. So I am a full-time sex and relationships teacher, so I am actually a teacher, but the only thing I really teach about are PSHE issues. We say I'm the sex lady. I actually teach about online safety. I teach about drugs and alcohol, because who am I teaching? Teenagers, and they get into all sorts. So I sort of have I do the sex, drugs and rock and roll. I can't imagine teaching anything else, actually. My route into teaching full-time has been a bit backwards. I've always worked in sexual health, always. I used to work for Brooke. I don't know if people have heard of Brooke. It's a national sexual health charity for young people under 25. And I worked there as their special needs lead in their education team. I liked it so much and found that there was such an issue, I felt, with really being able to make a proper improvement in how we develop and deliver sex education for young people with additional needs, that I used to go to Queen Alexandra College once a week and just do a few sessions for them. And it got to the point where every week on a Tuesday I would scream and beg not to be sent home. And they eventually listened to me and offered me the opportunity to go and work there full time, which is awesome, because I've got nearly 200 reasonably willing students who are as enthusiastic about their sex ed, which is amazing, but also about making improvements to it. So it means I've got a research base, and that's pretty important. It means I've got nearly a decade's worth of data to draw on now to show that it does work, which is pretty useful when you're out there trying to explain why we should be teaching about sex education and consent to people with learning disabilities, because let me tell you, that freaks people out. So actually moving there full time was a really important step, and I think it's one that's going to serve us well as we go forward. What I do is mandatory PSHE sessions, which are mostly sex and relationship sessions, every week for all of the students, regardless of abilities. And I should say that at our college we have two cohorts of students. We have students who've got very complex needs, who may not achieve independence or be able to live without a great deal of support after college, independently. I don't think that would necessarily happen. And we have a cohort of students who have a really diverse range of needs. We have students who go off to university. You know, I mean, we have a really wide range of learning needs at the college, and all of them have sex and relationships education for the whole time they're there. Now, obviously, for some students, that's going to be a lot more in-depth and complex than for others. But as far as I'm concerned, if by the time my students leave college, they all know that this is theirs, that their body is their own, that they have absolute say over who touches it and when, and whether they want to be engaged in anything, you know, then I think that that's a pretty good start. And we should be talking about it openly and, you know, up front. So I also do, as well as all that, one-to-one follow-up work, because the other kind of leg of my job, if you like, is a counsellor. So I do both. And that has worked really well as a model. Specialist work for us, we have just on a sort of side note, we have a really high proportion of students who are transgender at Queen Alexandra College. Don't know why, just have. Suits me, but we do quite a lot of specialist work around gender there as well. So it's fascinating stuff. So why is sex and relationships education important? Well, well, exactly, you know, the thing is, if you look at the national standards and the mandatory timetables, it's not. Oh, good. That's not helpful, is it? Sex and relationships education is important because it is basically, and no puns intended here, okay, is what you can hang your hat on, okay? Now, everything follows. You know, we can't achieve independence. We can't go out and be in the community. We can't follow the rules, can we? Is that not the, you know, the basic sort of tenets of life? If I don't know what's appropriate when I'm out in company, can I go out easily? No, right? So Queen Alexandra College, our main, I mean, yes, obviously we want all our students to go on and achieve academically, but our mission is to help young people with complex needs achieve independence. I'm telling you now, you are never going to achieve independence if you don't know what's appropriate sexually and socially. And I think that sex and relationship education as part of a good PSHE curriculum is what starts all that off. Okay, so here is my, you're about to be treated to Gill Leno's manifesto for why sex ed is important. I hope you're all engaged. Okay, right. It allows people to make informed choices about their sexual health. I cannot tell you how many times I've stood at the front of a class or at a conference like this and said, do you know what? I do teach about sex. I teach about it in the last 6 weeks of a full year's course. What I'm really teaching people about is making a choice. What we have to understand is that everybody's sexual health choices and sexual health rights are the same. Mine are the same as yours. They're the same as my students. We've all got the same. One of our basic fundamental human rights is to make a choice, and that is one of your sexual health rights as well. If you don't give people information in a way that they understand and can use it, they ain't going to make any positive choices for themselves. And that really is where I'm coming from all the time. I don't know if I said when I was talking about what I do at the beginning, I'm also a safeguarding designate. So, you know, my work is pretty solidly grounded in the fundamental need to make sure that people know what their rights are and that they can exercise them in a positive way. It promotes a sense of equality and autonomy. Now, I really feel this is important when working with and for people who have additional needs, particularly additional physical needs, because our bodies, they're all our own. They're the only thing that you get to keep, aren't they? You know. Now, if you are somebody who is in receipt of a lot of personal care or intimate care, as some of our students are, actually, your body kind of doesn't belong to you anymore. It's somebody else's to care for, somebody else's to sort out. Someone else tells you when to go to the loo, you know? So I think it's very important to talk about our bodies and what that means, you know, how we experience pleasure. Particularly important, I think. And it gives a sense of equality for everybody and autonomy, that actually this is yours and you get a say over what happens. It does improve social skills and expression. One of the reasons that I do in our first term with everybody in September is we do public and private, right? Because you kind of have to, you know. You'd be amazed how many young people I get turn up to our college who, we've done sex ed, okay, that's great. So who can tell me what public means? Nothing. What does private mean? Oh, it means you can't open a letter. Yes, but what's a private place? What are your private body parts? What's an appropriate activity to do in public? It's a really important, fundamental part of what we do. It does allow greater independence, see above. You know, if you know what you can and can't do in public, you're going to be a lot safer out in being independent. This is one that people, I don't think, realise, but it reduces the risk of sexual abuse. It reduces the risk of sexually transmitted infections and unplanned pregnancy. And the reason for that is, if you don't know what something is, if you don't understand what's happening to you, how are you going to disclose about it? I reckon that in the last nearly 20 years, let's gloss over that lightly, I reckon I've probably had the equivalent of a disclosure every term. That someone has said, actually, this happened to me and I wasn't happy about that. Or this has happened to me in the past and I didn't know what that was. Or this is happening right now and actually I see that this isn't something that I want to continue. It's incredibly powerful as a safeguarding mechanism. It's a protective factor. And finally, it does establish and reinforce appropriate behaviour, which is why it's so important that it's done in classes amongst peers in context. It's much more powerful doing it that way than a bit of one-to-one. I genuinely believe that that is the case. There is, however, a fairly high risk if you don't get it right. So there is a massive need for accessible, transferable information. One of the things that's really pushed me along is the need for resources that people can make sense of and that actually, you know, feels relevant to them. So much of the information that's presented for young people, or for people in general, around sex and relationships depicts straight, white, non-disabled people all smiling and not experiencing any pain or awkwardness, okay? That is not how it works, last time I checked. So that is a big deal. Getting your resources right is very important. They need to be inclusive and tactile in some cases so that everybody can use them. There are not many of them, I have to say, and it's something that technology is assisting with, certainly, but it's also something that has to be overcome all the time when you're trying to deliver something that's essentially abstract to people who may not be able to use visual cues. It's you know, it's a challenge. It has to be age appropriate and relevant. And this is something that is still being worked on, but there are new resources coming out all the time, thank goodness, which are making life a little bit easier. I'll be talking about those a bit more this afternoon when I do my workshops. Finally, it's about matching up formal and informal sex ed messages so that people get consistent, you know, ongoing information. When I say formal and informal, I'm the formal. I'm the person standing at the front with the lesson plans. I'm the bit that they try to forget as they slope out of the room and run away. But the informal stuff is what everybody else is saying. So family, friends, media, you know, social workers, support workers. It's important that everybody is as clued up and willing to talk about it as each other, because otherwise things don't stick, do they? Or misinformation is conveyed and remembered. So common issues that we come across. Examining puberty, sex, relationships and sexuality in an appropriate and relevant way. Big problem. Fear of getting it, this is one of the barriers, the biggest barriers I think, particularly in special education about teaching sex ed, is the fear of getting it wrong and then leaving young people more vulnerable than their peers than when you started. Now, I have to say that if you're having a stab at it, you're not getting it wrong. You know, if you're willing to have a conversation, then that's a pretty good start. But I can understand why people freak out about this kind of thing. Understanding boundaries and appropriate, you know, relationships. So how do you facilitate and support that? These are all things that people are concerned about when they're thinking about sex education. And it's something that, unfortunately, unless we start treating it as a mandatory part of the curriculum, there's not going to be enough training for teachers and support workers to rectify that. So it's something that we all have to have a hand in, really. No pun intended. Sorry. Look, you know that bit at the beginning about how I was really concerned about sex and, you know, I didn't get any sex edits. Mainly it's just so I can do dirty jokes at an audience and they can't run away. Okay, so what works then? We have to have, and this is one of the things that my body of work at Queen Alexandra College has kind of informed, is that we have to have this no secrets necessary culture around talking about bodies and sex and sexuality and relationships. And unfortunately, we know that that is often not the case with young people in general, because let's face it, sex education is pretty rubbish, but also particularly with people who've got additional needs. We don't really like talking about it, thanks. And it's not a good, positive way of dealing with it. There has to be an environment where people can talk without being frightened or feeling ashamed of themselves if they have to bring up a problem or discuss it. It's crucial. The reason we know that works is that some of the outcomes that we've had at QAC following, mandatory for students but also mandatory training for staff is that we have a much higher rate of self-disclosure, so students know when they've been at risk and piping up and saying something, but also we have open conversations. We actually have, and I think we are still the only specialist college, or maybe even specialist education institution. We're the only Stonewall diversity champions in the country. We have an LGB and a T peer support group, which is pretty unheard of, I think, in a specialist setting at least. We have a men's group where things are discussed. We have a women's group where things are discussed. We have a drop-in session for people to talk about periods, because that's complicated if you've got sensory issues, or it can be. So we're pretty on the ball with that, and I think it's really working. We have a focus on the positives and pleasures of growing up, of sex, of relationships. This is incredibly important. When we work with people with additional needs, additional learning needs, whether they are physical, learning, sensory, whatever, there is often this language of fear, that sex is something that's done to you, that there's terrible risks involved, that it's not something you're going to enjoy, because let's face it, it's terrible, right? And that actually means that people are really unlikely to speak up if they think that something's not right. That's just how it is. I mean, we've found that when we do baseline assessments of students coming in, that the words that they use to talk about sex are almost universally negative, which is really worrying. It means that there's a very high rate of young people saying, oh, well, I'm not allowed to do this, or, don't tell me mum that I've got a boyfriend or girlfriend. Well, why not? I'm sure they're quite happy to know, actually. There's a lot of secrecy that's brought on by that kind of attitude. So it's important that it is sex positive, body positive, whenever you do sex and relationships education. And finally, there have to be consistent, clear and compassionate boundaries which are set and then maintained. So how we work with that at the college is that we do a lot of work with parents as well as with staff. Parents are kept informed about what we're doing in classes. We do it through the parents' forum as well as through email. And if we are experiencing a challenge, then we will try and all work together to ensure that the messages that we're giving for young people are sustained at home as well as at college. That's it, really. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. How do we do it? We do open dialogue about sex and relationships. And when I say open, I mean it's really open. There is no glossing over what we're going to do. I don't dodge the fact that this week is STI week and it's going to get nasty. This is what we talk about. If we've had to have a big frank conversation about masturbating, then it's brought up and we talk about it. That it's important that parents know what we're doing, and also that students know that it's not wrong. We are really informed and open about things like online safety. Now, this is something that we've had to tackle a little bit at a time with our parents forum, because initially there was a bit of, a bit like Robin was saying with his ladies, like, well, how am I supposed to use that? We ran COPS courses. We got on and tackled it head on, because it's incredibly important. If you are a parent of a young person, that you don't have to be on Facebook. It's a breeding ground for terrible things. But you do need to at least know how it works, because if you don't know how it works, you can't safeguard your child. And that's something that I think parents are getting better and better and better at. We're always going to be, the digital immigrants here. The kids are the digital natives. They're the ones who've grown up with it. But it's very important that we are, on top of making sure that we are as literate as they are. And finally, accessing resources and so on that will support any talks and discussions that you have with your child. Now, for parents who are coming along to a workshop later on, in fact, I'll show you what the workshops are. Okay, so I'm doing a workshop for adults around rights, consent, pleasure and safety, although I'm open to discussion if that's not what you want to talk about. Parents, we're going to look at effective support, sharing resources, sharing experience, and sort of what your rights are within the within the structure of how you access effective sex and relationship stuff for your child. And then we're going to do one-to-one discussions for people that want them. Okay, that's me done. I think I'll shut up. Okay, thank you. Cheers.